Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for your time and happy Teachers Appreciation Week. I am so grateful to you for being willing to sit down with us today to talk about what it's like to be a teacher during COVID-19. But first and foremost, where do you teach? How many students do you have? Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a teacher in Colchester at Malance Bay School. I teach 5th grade. I have 23 students. I live in Georgia, but Vermont, but I grew up in Colchester. So I actually teach in a school that I went to school in as a child.
And how many years have you been teaching?
This is my 21st year teaching. So yeah.
That's incredible. Wow. Well, I cannot imagine, you probably haven't seen anything quite like this or experienced anything quite like this in your teaching career. So tell us, what has it been like? What are some of the greatest challenges and how have you seen things evolve over the last, what are we in week 8 now, week 9? I'm sure you've been keeping track.
Yeah, it's been a really, really big transition. So people don't realize that the school building is the great equalizer. So when we talk about our school buildings, that is what allows children to actually access their education. We feed them, we connect with them emotionally, we make them feel safe. Learning happens in a place where you feel safe and you feel like you belong. And that's what the school building really offers. So it's before you can get to learning, you have to offer those things to your students so that you can get them to learn as much as you need them to do. And adjusting to not having physical contact and being in the same physical space with them was really hard for so many of them. And it's hard for teachers. It's kind of what we do. You know, you talk to a lot of teachers and they're like, God, my job is most of the stuff that I didn't like about my job is like 99% of your day now. You're on a computer, you're talking to a screen, you don't get to be with the kids to see in the moment when they're struggling. You kind of have to, you know, you get their work and then you can give them some feedback. But the really good teaching and learning that happens when you're all together, that's not happening. So we're offering them some opportunities, but it's certainly not school. And there is a little bit of inequity just in where people are. You know, we have students whose parents are essential workers, so their parents haven't been able to work with them. I have many friends, even tonight, a friend of mine was texting me, she's like, I don't know how long I can do this remote learning thing. And she's a parent, not a teacher. I just think it's been really hard helping kids when you don't know where they were before they came home and you're trying to help. I have a daughter taking pre-calculus. I can tell you I have not helped her with pre-calculus. And I know a lot of parents are in that same boat. They're trying to fill 2 roles. They might be working from home or they're not home because they're working in a hospital. And you can't meet all the needs of the kids at the same time.
And so give us a sense, what is the day like now? Are you on Zoom? Are you on Google Hangouts? How are you connecting with kids and how do you keep a schedule with them? What is that like? Give us a sense.
So different kids need different things. So one of the things that I really try to do is give each kid what they need. And I think most teachers try to do that. I'm fortunate I'm in a place that I have internet connection. I also went and had a friend hook me up. So I'm hardwired. I don't have to use Wi-Fi, which improved my quality of being able to connect with my kids. So when you know, just taking care of that first, depending on where you live, the technology access could be different. The next thing that we had to do was we had to make sure everybody had a device. So that took about 2 weeks to clean everything and to give everybody a device. And I will say the rollout in Colchester was really organized and it was thought out and slow, and that was intentional, and I think it was good. It's reduced the stress for students and for families, but now we're in a place where, okay, so everybody's figured out if we can get connected. Everybody's got a device that needs one. And now we meet on Zoom, we meet on Google Hangouts. Different teachers use different things. It's how I present my lessons. It's how I record my lessons. We are all working together to sort of meet with our kids as many times as possible. So you might put out, some lessons are recorded and then kids can call in and ask you questions. And then you can do a one-on-one Zoom, or you can do a 3-on-1 Zoom. And it's kind of meeting each kid where they are. I have some kids who just send me SOSs, and as soon as I can get them, I send them a link and we hook up and there we are. So it's really not a one size fits all. It's how do we try to meet each kid where they're at?
Oh, that's incredible. So there's no roadmap for this.
There is no roadmap. There is no book. I think there are some things organizationally, like how to get devices to kids, how to get their stuff to them, was really, well, would be in a, you know, a possibility. But when you're looking at what you're teaching, what we teach is informed by the curriculum, but you also, it's different every year. I've never taught the same way every year. Teachers don't teach the exact same way every year, because you're growing and building on what kids know from before, and you have to adjust in that moment. If there's a gap, you have to fill it, and you can't do that when you don't know what the gaps are because you're not together.
Yeah, that's thinking, I can't hardly imagine what that's like. And I do wonder, when we've talked a lot over the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks about the challenges around access to broadband on the one hand, and then with that, as a teacher, presuming there is broadband, the access surrounding devices. So how did you meet that challenge? Were there enough devices? And I think devices, you mean Chromebooks or laptops or the actual hardware needed for students to learn. Just tell us a little bit about that, because I know in Newbury, where I grew up, 1 in 3 kids do not have access to broadband. And then on top of that, there were a lot of issues around not having devices, and that's not just unique to Orange County. That I think there are sort of more rural parts of the state. But what was it like in Colchester?
So we're fortunate that the 6th through 12th graders we're already in a 1-to-1 sort of capacity. So half of our district was in a place where each kid had a device to use at school all day long. So that takes half of your kids. Then what we had to do was, in the classrooms, we have about half the devices. So it's a 2-to-1 sort of scenario in classrooms. And so for the 3 to 5s, 3rd grade to 5th grade, the superintendent looked at getting each of them a Chromebook if they needed it. So it involved putting together a survey, collecting every single Chromebook from every single classroom, cleaning them and sterilizing them, and then doing a sign out program so that you knew where the devices went. And so that slowly happened. And it was interesting because even within families, sometimes parents would be like, no, we have a laptop, we're good. But they weren't thinking about the fact, well, they were going to be on the laptop all day. I'm now working from home. Yes, we have a laptop, or I have a laptop, but I have 3 kids. And figuring out that it would be easier if they had one more device from school. And then our K through 2 kids, we had enough iPads that if kids didn't have access to them, didn't have a device at home, they could access. They're not using Zoom, they're using something called Seesaw, which I've never seen, but it's a more appropriate, you want different things for different age groups. So Seesaw is really appropriate for their age group. And so they got iPads if they needed them. But you have to keep track of those materials. You're accountable for them. And so you needed time to kind of organize that. For the first 2 weeks, we were on paper when we were doing maintenance of learning. It was on paper so that we could get the devices out.
And forgive me for being a little bit ignorant here, but once students have Chromebooks, it's possible for you to upload lesson plans and work from home so that you can basically manage distance learning to an extent.
Yes. So the next step, and probably one that was a huge challenge for us as a staff, you would never roll out a program that nobody had ever been trained on to kids at the same time. So we are using Google Classroom in our district, but something as immense and huge as getting your whole class to use some form of technology to organize and do all of their work, you would take a class on that. You would learn all the tools, you would learn how to use those tools and upload your work. So especially, you know, in the grades that are K through 5, we had never, you know, most people, there were a few people, but most people had never even used Google Classroom. So the next challenge was really us learning how to use technologies that we would never use. And there were lots of mistakes made. You know, you'd go to upload something and it's not working and the kids can't find it. They don't know how to turn it in. But it took another 2 weeks just to figure out how to turn in assignments. And so it's a process that you would never start so you know, without any knowledge trying something so huge with your students. We don't prepare that way. We learn about it, we try it, we experiment with each other, then we try it with kids. We would never do that, like, here you go, let's, you know, we just threw them in the pool.
The example of or the adage of building the plane, or
yes.
Flying the plane while you build it. So
yes. And we were flying it, we were building it, and then, you know, sometimes you might realize your wings a little not put together correctly, and you'd have to take it apart and put it back together again. I mean, it really was that sort of intense. It's just not the way anybody would ever roll something out to kids, ever.
Well, you're essential workers. You are in crisis response, and it's incredible, I think, the way that adaptation has happened. And I don't think we've heard enough from our teachers across Vermont and all that you all are facing every day and innovating and creating and just stepping up and meeting this incredible need. I do want to talk a little bit about equity and equity when it comes to children being able to access their teachers and you all having access to students. And I know that our teachers in Vermont provide so much more than day-to-day lesson planning, support services, as you said, the infrastructure of the school. Are there any lessons learned or sort of calls to action that you would see at this point? I mean, where do we go from here? Where do you see the greatest need? And I recognize that's probably about 4 questions in one, but we have a few more minutes. And I'd just love to hear any sort of lessons learned from this point in the COVID-19 response as an educator.
I think the call to action is going to be when we're all back together. There are so many kids that were just not emotionally in a place to handle this. We know there are kids out there who are in households that aren't safe and they're not accessing their education. The people who would be their mandated reporters, they don't have access to those. And we know that's happening and we can't help those kids. And that's really hard for us. Students who are just having a hard time emotionally from the separation, they're going to need some time to recover, and it's going to take people in the fall, hopefully, if we all come back, you know, whatever that looks like. We need fully staffed schools. We need probably more staff than we had before if we're going to make up for the time that we lost. Teachers in Vermont are really hardworking. We know that what our kids are getting right now are not what they would have gotten within the 4 walls of our classrooms. It's just not possible through this computer to give my students what I give them for the 6.5 hours that they're with me every single day. And we know we have to make up for that when we get them back. But we can't make up for it if, you know, school budgets are cut, if we don't have enough people to work with these kids. It's only going to happen with hard work and having enough people to provide services. Our kids are not going to come back like nothing happened. They are all living in some form of trauma with this separation, whether it's parents losing their jobs, parents who are sick, not being able to access their education, feeling sad, feeling like they don't have anything to look forward to. We have to emotionally heal them and then offer them an education. And we can't do that if we don't have enough people in the building to meet their needs. And our fight as educators is going to start when we get our kids back. We're going to be there, and we are already planning. I know I'm teaching the end of 4th grade curriculum next year. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about how to help them, but I can't do it if I don't have enough people in my building, or if they're increasing class sizes. We're going to need more next year, because these kids are not going to come back the same as they left. And we're not going to come back the same as we left. We just need help. We're going to need help. And so are the kids.
That's, I want to capture all of that. And I want to make sure people hear what you've just said loud and clear. I think what you're sharing is a message from the field. It's a message from the trenches. It's a message from those who are day in and day out working to keep education happening in Vermont. I want to thank you again. If there was a parting word for your students, or for parents, or for your fellow teachers, is there anything you'd like to share? In the occasion of Teachers Appreciation Week, and again, thank you. You are a hero. It is incredible what you're doing every day, and I just want to thank you for everything that you do and taking the time to tell us what's happening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think for me, I just want people to know, like, we love our kids. We miss our kids. We did this to teach children, to help them be ready to be members of society, and we can't wait to be back in our classrooms with our children. No amount of technology in the world is ever going to provide, I have learned, what we offer in the walls of our schools, because you can't get that through a screen.
Yeah, that's the parting thought for today, and I look forward to us all being back in person again. And again, thank you, and thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for taking the time today. Happy Teachers Appreciation Week.
Great, thank
you,
you.
Stephanie.